What is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 79 of That's No Moon Pod. Just got done watching episode 6 of The Acolyte. Spoilers ahead if you haven't seen it yet. This episode was interesting. There were certain things that I really liked, and then there was a lot of things that more or less just felt the same kind of tone, same kind of just overall dialogue, certain character choices, and just certain things that this show has continued to do in terms of being inconsistent with a lot of its tones. But the way this episode starts off, we get Osha waking up suddenly in a gasp, like she's done at least 4 times now in the show. And she sees that she's in this cave and presumably she got captured by Chimera, which she did, and she goes out looking for him on the planet that this dude is shacked on, and she follows Chimera down into like this riverbed or something, and homeboy gets completely nude. We don't see nothing, but we do see some scars on his back as he's like walking into this pool or whatever to clean up, and he obviously senses that she's following him, and she sees that he left his lightsaber right there for her to grab. So she picks it up, and once he senses that she did, this is where he starts to kind of toy with her a bit, trying to get psychologically on her side, I guess. And there's this weird moment where he gets out of the pool still nude, and she's kind of just like checking him out while still holding his lightsaber. And I don't know if this scene was supposed to be erotic or trying to make us feel some type of way about it, but I just thought it was a weird choice for him to get naked and for him to be exposing himself to Osha while kind of talking to her about this and that, about why he's doing this, and kind of getting to know who he is really. And we go back to where Soul is on the ship with May pretending to be Osha. And at this point in the episode, he still doesn't know that she's May in disguise as Osha. He's trying to get a distress signal called to the Jedi saying, like, me and my squad just got wiped out, this and that. Meanwhile, Basil's still in the background, sniffing around. He could tell that that's not really Osha. And meanwhile, Soul's able to get some kind of distress signal out to Vanestra and the other Jedi. And these scenes were what I was talking about, to where just the tones, the overall writing just doesn't seem to just completely mesh for me. Um, Whenever we get to Vanestra, she's getting the message that Soul was just in trouble, and it seems like him and his group just suffered heavy casualties. And Vanestra's getting the word from this random Jedi who I don't think they even mention his name. And she's kind of seeming a little distraught because she obviously knows that she's pretty much the reason why all these got killed in the first place for sending them there. And this random Jedi that's talking to Venestra just to me doesn't seem like a Jedi. And not by the character choice or anything like that. It just seems like the look and just the overall way he speaks. There was just something about every time he popped up on screen, this particular Jedi with Venestra, I was just looking at him and I'm like, this dude just does not feel like a Jedi to me. He just seems like an actor, a random actor that they put on some Jedi robes on him and that was it. And I just couldn't help but thinking that every time this particular Jedi popped up on screen. Venestra, there's something about Venestra because there's this moment to where, and I'll get into a little bit more about her as well, dealing with Chimere, but there's a moment to where Venestra and this random Jedi go to Kofar to discover all the dead Jedi, and they're talking about what could have caused this, who could have done this, yada yada. And we finally get that moment from those certain clips that we had seen to where those bugs or birds or whatever tries to attack them, and Venestra pulls out her lightsaber whip and slashes it in half. And I feel like that's kind of foreshadowing something else that we see with Chimere later on. And that random Jedi dude is trying to put the pieces together with Venestra, saying who could have done this, who's as powerful, or who's powerful enough to have killed all these Jedi single handed. And he kind of throws in the idea that maybe it was Master Soul. And Venestra was like, that's a pretty heavy claim that you just said. And she kind of feels like she knows a little bit something else that she's not telling this dude. And we get back to where Soul and May are on the ship, and Soul's just kind of still living in tragedy and dealing with the fact that he lost his Padawan and his friends. And Lee Jong-jae as Soul still is, I feel like, really carrying this show in terms of just being one of the more consistent characters with his just acting ability, his dialogue, and just his overall depth of character because there's still a lot more to him that we have yet to figure out. He still has to tell Osha or May what actually happened on their home planet with the whole massacre of her family and the fire and whatnot. And Basil again still sniffing around, and I guess he lets Soul know what's up. And there's a moment to where Soul and May are having this conversation, and he tells her to do something to the ship. And once she turns around, he sets the stuns her, blasts her, knocks her out. So he figured the whole thing out. May's plan was not as carefully thought out as maybe she thought it was. And that's kind of what I'm saying about just the overall writing and some of the choices that these characters make. May, especially, uh, she's just like a dumb character to me. Like, not even just in terms of just like the overall dialogue or the acting ability or whatnot. Is just her character as May just does dumb things throughout the show consistently, even to when she was uh, the little twins in the episode 3. Her doing that whole thing where she's saying she's gonna kill OSHA out of nowhere. She's like, all right, screw it, I'm just gonna burn this whole thing down. And then obviously we see what happens whenever she's with Chimere on Kofar trying to get to the Wookiee, and then out of nowhere she decides to flip the script and say, never mind, I'm just gonna turn myself in. And then her and OSHA have that conversation where it seems like she's trying to get OSHA on her side, and then she's like, never mind again. I'm just gonna knock you out and cut my hair, and then see what I can do with Soul, trying to pretend to be you. And it's just like every time May and OSHA are on the screen, I feel like the show just gets more and more complicated as to what the show wants to be. I feel like the twins in the show just don't really do anything for the grand scheme of it all. Because I feel like what's going to end up happening at the end of the show, which we've only got 2 more episodes left, I don't feel like the twins are going to be something that we're going to look back on at the end of the show, that we're going to be seeing the twins as something that really had a big part as to why this show sticks the landing or not. But some of the things that I thought really worked were the whole thing with Chimere and OSHA, to where this dude's trying to get OSHA to join him. He's like slowly manipulating her mind, telling her the right things and telling her maybe not necessarily what she wants to hear, but what she needs to hear. Because for whatever reason, she seems like she's getting conflicted just being around this dude for the little amount of time that she was. And she obviously has chances to kill him in this episode, but he's like slowly digging his hooks around her, and come to find out that he was a Jedi a long time ago, and something happened between him and his master to where he feels like the Jedi did him wrong, and they were trying to hold him back in some way, and he was able to figure out the ways of the Force still, and wind up slowly kind of turning down this dark path. And those were the things that I thought really worked for me in the show. It was some of those tones that I was hoping that we were going to get more of in the show. I remember when this whole series got announced way back, to where that was the idea that was given, to where the show was possibly going to be about us following the Sith and kind of learning more about them and kind of how they operate, and the Jedi obviously clashing with them at some point. And then I remember hearing, leading up before the show's release, probably about a year ago, to where there was some kind of leak or some information that got out to where the show was going to end up being about us following these twins, and then one twin winds up falling to the dark side or something, and then the other obviously stays good, and then that was like this whole thing that got out. And I remember feeling some type of way about it to where I was like, that doesn't sound as intriguing as what the original pitch was. And I was hoping that it wasn't going to come to fruition, but here we are. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. So I don't know if there was like some kind of rewrite or they decided to go a different direction than what was originally said. But getting back to this episode, again, Chimere, he's just slowly showing Osha his ways and his thinking. And there's this moment to where he's talking to Osha, he's kind of making some soup or something, and he has like this moment to where he's like he has his back turned towards her and she notices the scar on his back and he says something to where it was his old master or something and that could be the reason why he wound up not becoming a Jedi in the first place. And what I was talking about earlier about Venestra, it seemed like she sent something that she wasn't telling that random Jedi on Kofar. I feel like possibly Venestra was Chimere's master at one point, and for whatever reason, the relationship went sour, and possibly Chimere tried to kill Venestra, and she ended up whipping out her lightsaber whip and slashed Chimere in the back because the scar on his back looks a little. It's not like a straight line or nothing. It looks like something that could possibly be from a lightsaber whip. So I feel like they're kind of going down that path. And Vanestra, again, she seemed a little uneased on Kofar to where she possibly could have sensed Chimere and just kind of putting the pieces together herself to where she's kind of crapping her pants thinking this is even more of my fault. This was my old apprentice gone rogue and now he's out here killing all these Jedi. So they're kind of laying out the groundwork for that possibility, I feel like. I still think that there's a possibility of the twins' mother coming into play somehow because last episode Osha was telling um Yord that Chimera was getting in their minds, and that was something that her mother used to do. And getting back to Soul and May on the ship, she wakes up after getting zapped, and there's like this weird scene to where he's like telling her, "You're gonna help me find Osha," because he still has all these things that he hasn't said yet. And there's just like this weird tone and vibe of this scene to where Soul's looking a little more distressed or pissed off, I guess. And I don't know if the show's gonna end up making us not like Soul in the end because this whole cliffhanger thing that they keep doing each week to where there's more to the story that Soul hasn't said to Osha about what actually happened on their home planet. I'm hoping that they don't try to make us not like Soul for whatever choice that he made all those all those episodes ago. Um, but it seems like they're kind of trying to make us feel like that for whatever reason. But I hope that's not the case because I feel like no matter what happened was Soul and the twins' home planet, I feel like it had to have been for the greater good. Otherwise, they're just gonna try to paint the Jedi as just being not as good of people as we have always thought of them as. And the last scene that we get is Kymir's working on his helmet, kind of doing some welding action on it, and he's kind of going over the whole thing about it to where it's built out of this material that is indestructible to lightsabers, and that's kind of why every time it would clash with the lightsaber, it would kind of make the lightsaber flicker in and out. Um, Cortosis, I believe what it's called, and it's also kind of like a Magneto helmet to where the Jedi can't get into the person's mind who's wearing this specific helmet made out of this material. And he leaves it on the table, and he ends up walking away, telling Osha that she could try it on if she wants to, kind of playing with her even more. And she walks over to it and she decides to put this thing on. And there's like this little slit where the eyes go, and you could barely see anything coming out of it. And she's kind of just breathing in and out while wearing this helmet. So I guess this is kind of the show telling us that possibly maybe Osha is gonna be the one to end up being Kymir's acolyte, because in last episode and in this episode he talks about wanting a pupil, wanting an acolyte, and he said earlier while talking to Osha, talking about the rule of two, to where the Sith there's always a master and apprentice. So he's obviously trying to recruit Osha to become his acolyte because he obviously knows that May is just this dysfunctional person and character to where she could flip the script at any moment, and she's just kind of at a constant battle with herself. And Osha seems more headstrong and kind of knows what she wants a lot more than her sister, which is a fact. And that's pretty much where the episode ends, with Osha wearing Kymir's Smilo Ren helmet. And I'm not sure if this is going to kind of lead into possibly the origins of the Knights of Ren, because in last episode they played Kylo Ren's theme at the end, but I just feel like there's so many things that are still up in the air with the show, and we're almost done at this point. We only got 2 episodes left. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to stick the landing, especially if the last 2 episodes are as short as just this whole series has been. But I don't want to hop on here and just completely just trash on the show. There's just things that this whole series has done throughout to make me feel like there's very little to cling on to. And I feel like every time I'm watching the show, there are moments to where you're thinking like, there's something here. I'm digging this. And then they just kind of change the direction again, and then the tone just constantly gets jumbled around, and we're constantly trying to figure out certain things and put the pieces together, but there's just always more and more questions, I feel like, at the end of each episode. And with there only being 2 episodes left, and presumably only being an hour left of the show, as a whole. I feel like there's just gonna be some things that are gonna stick and just some things that are just gonna fall flat. And I feel like that's just kind of what this show has been doing so far. I wish that we could have just gotten a show focusing on Soul, Jackie, Yord, and Chimere being this secret Sith who has this path to finding an acolyte, and you could have just taken out the twins storyline as a whole. They don't need to be in the show, and we could have gotten this cool murder mystery following the Sith character and kind of his journey through the dark side while killing all these Jedi. And we got Soul and Jackie and Yord kind of doing this true detective style through the galaxy, trying to figure out who's doing this and why, and them trying to put a stop to all this. I feel like that's just such a cleaner and just a way more interesting story than what we've gotten in this series. But if you're digging it, that's awesome. I'm just not fully invested as much as I wish I was. But you never know. With the last two episodes, they could totally flip the script and make me feel a different way of some sorts about the show, but that remains to be seen. What'd y'all think of this week's episode of The Acolyte? Leave a comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Still posting new release comic books, variant covers on my Instagram. Go over and check it out. Links will be down in the description. Full comic books on my Snapchat as well. I'll post 20 or so images on my Instagram of the comic book, but the full comic book with the variant covers will be on my Snapchat for free. So if you're interested, go over there and take a look. Thanks for watching, y'all. I really do appreciate whoever's tuning into these. I'm going to keep pumping these out each and every week for y'all. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.